today my group will present about the IFSB 14 and will be discussed about the introduction of the IFSB 14, the risk, enterprise risk management, process of risk management for takaful undertakings, and system risk consideration in takaful, and the conclusion. Without further ado, let's begin. Salutations. Today, I would like to discuss about the introduction of IFSB 14. The Islamic Financial Services Board IFSB, in an effort to guide the takaful Islamic insurance industry towards a stable and sound financial environment, published its first two standards on takaful in December 2009 and December 2010. The first standard, which is IFSB 8, Guiding Principle on Governance for Takaful Islamic Insurance Undertakings, provide the industry with guiding principle on the appropriate governance framework for a takaful undertaking TU. The second standard, which is IFSB 11, provide a framework for solvency supervision of a takaful insurance, which is for takaful Islamic insurance undertakings, provide a framework for solvency supervision of a takaful operation. Under related documents published by the IFSB, that is IFSB 10, Guiding Principle of Sharia Government System for Institutions Offering Islamic Financial Services, and IFSB 9, Guiding Principle on Conduct of Business for Institutions Offering Islamic Financial Services, also provide guidance in the areas of Sharia governance, system, and conduct on business of an Islamic financial institution. Next is in a 2006 issues paper published by the IFSB and the International Association of Insurance Supervisor IAIS. The major issues facing the takaful industry were identified and grouped into four themes, which is corporate governance, financial and prudential regulation, transparency, reporting and market conduct, and the supervisory review process. The themes highlight areas within the takaful industry which require further research and guidance from the regulatory perspective. Last but not least, this standard is intended to establish minimum standard in the area of risk management for the direction and guidance of takaful operators TO, as well as insurance takaful supervisor. The standards discuss how management of risk inherent in the TU should be implemented. Next, for the main objective, first is to provide minimum standards for the development of a risk management framework for ease of management of the TU and supervision by its governing bodies, and supervisory authorities to help create a safe and prudent environmental for the growth, sustainability, and development of the takaful industry. And for the specificities of takaful undertakings relevant to risk management, a TU aims to uphold the principle of Sharia in providing for pooling of risk of the participants. The application of Sharia principle is therefore fundamental to the operation of the undertaking, and the undertaking should have a Sharia board to assist in it, assuring that these principles are upheld. TU shares some similarities with conventional insurance in that both involve pooling the risk exposure of a group of participants to specified uncertain future events, with the objective of providing assistance to those who are exposed to the occurrence of those events. TU resemble in this respect conventional, mutual, or cooperative insurance undertakings in which the policyholders are collectively the owners of the funds and therefore provide insurance to one another, bearing the insurance risk collectively above through the medium of a legal entity. Moreover, TUs differs most fundamentally from conventional proprietary insurers, where the ownership of the entity bearing the insurance risk is separate from the policyholders to which it provides insurance. In certain product features commonly in family takaful, TU also shares some similarities with conventional insurance by providing a saving feature whereby a part of the contribution is pooled into each participant's investment fund, PIF. On the other hand, TUs that are constructed as hybrid entities with an operator also differ from conventional mutuals in various respects. This may affect the incidence of the risk to undertaking because the application of Sharia principles. The differences in the status of the different stakeholders in conventional insurance and takaful affect the incidence of risk among the different types of stakeholders and have consequences for the way those risks need to be managed. Means of mitigating risk to participants' interests may not necessarily be effective in mitigating the impact of the same risk on the interests of shareholders, or vice versa, and the interests may conflict. That's all for the introduction. Next, I would like to pass to another person to continue.
So now I'll be presenting about risk part. I've differentiated into three parts. The first is about International Standard on Risk Management in Insurance. It has stated that Insurance Core Principle ICP have provided requirement for the supervisor. The first requirement is insurer to have effective system of risk management and internal control. The second requirement for insurer is to address all relevant and material risks. The second part is about risk specific to takaful undertakings. Most of the risk for takaful undertaking is similar with those conventional insurers. The three risks that I will share about it. The first risk is risk of Sharia non-compliance. However, takaful undertaking is exposed to risk of Sharia non-compliance. It means that breach of Sharia principle may render contract invalid under Sharia, which included deprive participants of takaful protection, causes loss to the company, damage of the reputation, and exposed to the regulatory action. Sharia non-compliance risk is relevant to the product development process of takaful undertaking. It can be explained that when takaful undertaking want to compete over conventional insurer and even takaful counterparts, takaful undertaking may inadvertently introduce Sharia non-compliance into the products. The second risk is risk arising from segregation of fund. Takaful undertaking require necessary attention in separate of fund attribute to participant, which are participant risk fund and participant investment fund. And for the perspective of shareholder is shareholder fund. The structure of takaful undertaking different from conventional insurer in which shareholder fund of conventional proprietary insurer is available to support insurance activities. The segregation of these funds in a takaful undertaking brings with it a set of agency risks. In view of this agency relationship, fairness and transparency are essential features of takaful. Segregation of funds introduces risk of incorrect attribution of transaction to a fund. It means that it will resulting expenses incurred or income received by wrong fund. This result creates unfairness between different types of shareholders. Therefore, transparency is essential to help to protect the interests of different shareholders, so that the participant can aware before entering to contract which the revenue credited and expenses charges is either to participant risk fund or participant investment fund. The third risk is risk relating to use of re-takaful. The International Association of Insurance Supervisors (IAIS) has required the supervisor to establish standards for the use of reinsurance and other forms of risk transfer. It means that the insurers are required to control and report their programs for such activities by using liquidity management and documentation of certainty. The third part that I'm going to present is significant risk of particular relevance to takaful. The risk related is operational risk, and it can be defined as the risk of losses caused by the internal process, people, or external activities. This included the risk of losses from Sharia non-compliance. Takaful operator have fiduciary role in respect of operation to ensure that the takaful undertaking is always compliant with Sharia rules. Takaful operator should establish policies and process to ensure that the product cycle of takaful undertaking is compliant with Sharia rules. The second is credit risk. It can be defined as risk that counterparty fails to meet the obligation in agreed terms. This type of risk may arise from operation, financing, and investment activities. The credit risk can also be treated default risk. This risk arises when takaful operator do not or partially receive cash that they should receive because other parties fail to meet the obligation when entering the contract. Credit risk in takaful undertaking is risk default asset held as investment or participants risk fund, participant investment fund, and also shareholder fund. The third one is liquidity risk. Liquidity risk can be defined as the risk of losses of takaful undertaking when it was unable to meet its obligation when they fall due. It means that liquidity risk arises when the company do not have enough liquidity asset. In this case, if there are increases of illiquidity asset, the liquidity risk also increases. This can expose takaful undertaking to risk of reputational damage and give unsustainable future for the survival of institution. The last one is legal and compliance risk. It can be defined as the risk related to regulatory implication result from the operational activities and the dealing with the shareholder. Takaful operator have responsibility in ensuring that the manager of participant risk fund and participant investment fund is carry out their duties in ethical ways. Takaful operator also need to avoid legal risks such as non-compliance with regulation. For example, breach of contractual obligation and fail in enforcing the contract. As a result, takaful operator should also alert in preventing and detecting the suspected money laundering, fraud, and also other financial crime that causes loss to takaful undertaking.
I will be explaining some elements under enterprise risk management, which also include the asset liability management and also risk governance. Now, for the first element in enterprise risk management will be general framework. Under general framework, the takaful undertaken, the TU, is exposed to the risk that affects its ability to achieve its objective or even its continuing existence. The takaful operator is responsible as the manager of participants' funds and should accordingly establish and review the framework for managing the differences risks of undertaking. The framework mentioned is commonly described as the enterprise risk management. That should be comprehensive in nature and dealing with all the risks of funds making up the takaful undertaking. Next is the risk policies and strategies. In this element, the takaful operator should clearly document its risk policies and strategies within a risk management framework that is appropriate to the nature and scale of its activity. It should be developed in a consistent manner with the risk of the framework to provide clear guidelines to the personnel. Thirdly, which is risk identification. Risk identification is a process of where the takaful operator considers and record all foreseeable events whose occurrence could have an impact on the financial condition. The takaful operator should have a process in place to ensure that it's considered the possibility of a new risk emerging in the business environment. In addition, risk assessment, response, and control is a process of which each risk may commence at the same time, such as risk identification, mitigating, or transferring, and those who identified a risk is frequently contribute to its assessment. Assessment here means the process of risk categorizing, which are grouped into categories that are relevant. For the fifth element is control framework. The takaful operator here should maintain a control framework that reflects the risk policy adopted. The purpose of internal control framework is to provide assurance at all levels of management that the business proposed to enable the board to determine the undertaking. Next is risk monitoring. Here, the takaful operator should monitor the status of the risk that has identified through adequate management information system. The information prepared for risk monitoring purpose should include information on all significant policies. For the last element, which is risk reporting, the risk reporting process should cover all internal control and external risk reporting requirements that must include on how relevant and reliable risk information is captured to the BOD Syariah Board and public or regular reporting. Moving on with the second part that I will be explaining, which is Asset Liability Management, ALM. It is an essential part of risk management framework, whereas the takaful undertaken is evaluating stabilization based on the appropriateness of matching assets and liabilities. There are two factors in ALM, which is separate consideration of constituent parts of takaful undertaken. This is where the takaful operator may apply such strategies within a fund, but it should consider any fiduciation obligation that has different groups of participation within the same fund. Next is risk affecting asset liability. Here, the takaful operator should monitor the main risks that cause any mismatches between assets and liability of constituent parts of takaful undertaken. It may affect the amount of asset that need to match the undertaken's liability during the forecast period. Furthermore, I will be explaining about the risk governance. Here, governance refers to the process and structure adopted by the organization to ensure that its policies are executed. Now, for the internal control framework that consists of 3 lines of defense. The first line defense represents the control embedded in daily operation of organization that responsible to the BOD for compliance performance of the area of which they in charge of. The second line of defense consists of a risk compliance function independent of the first line of defense, which is responsible to monitor the effectiveness of risk management mechanism by considering whether the design of control is adequate. Lastly, the third line of defense provides insurance mechanism for operation of control, which is audited on an independent basis. Now for the role of Board of Directors, the BOD that has responsibility for ensuring that the risk of which the takaful undertaken is exposed and appropriately respond. They also need to approve the design of framework and monitor execution of appropriate risk report. Moving on with the role of Syariah Board, the Syariah Board shall make inquiries to the management to consider necessary purpose of certifying sufficient information on the risk management which matter that are relevant. We have known the role of Board of Directors, role of Syariah Board. Now, lastly, the role of management. Here is where the takaful operator is responsible of running business under authority of the BOD and carries out day-to-day operation. The management personnel who are not involved in governance function should also be required to report promptly and be aware of present risk exposure.
Greetings and salutations to Sir Mustafa. Today, I'll be talking about the Own Risk and Solvency Assessment, also known as ORSA. Now, what is ORSA? The ORSA is a key part of a takaful undertaking's risk management system, assessing its financial strength on a forward-looking basis. It is reported to the Board of Directors to assist in strategic decision-making and assess resilience to foreseeable events. It challenges the takaful undertaking's current financial system and risk management framework, providing more time to develop and implement solutions. The ORSA, for a takaful undertaking, should take into account the separation of funds between the participant's risk fund, participant's investment fund, and shareholders fund, as well as the potential impact transactions between funds and in particular of QAR or any other kind of financial assistance that the shareholders' fund will provide to the participants' risk fund. The takaful operator should model how QAR or other support will be made available and repaid, and the impact on their stakeholders throughout the process. If the projected ability of the participants' risk fund to meet its obligations is contingent on recognition of QAR or other support, the takaful operator will need to assess whether or not the support will be provided. The ORSA process of a takaful undertaking should be conducted on a continuous basis, under the oversight of a risk management function and with regular reporting to the board of directors. The parameters and assumptions used should be realistic and justifiable, and the takaful operator should determine the overall financial resources needed by the takaful undertaking. This process should enable the takaful operator to assess the quality and adequacy of the capital resources in each fund, as well as any need for QAR or other support for the shareholders' fund to the participants' fund. The ORSA is an internal initiative by a takaful operator to self-assess the risk profile and financial condition of the takaful undertaking that it manages. It should be structured in such a way that it reflects each takaful undertaking's risk exposure, size of its participants' risk fund or participants' investment fund and shareholders' fund, its complexity, and the risk appetite and risk policies that have been approved by its board of directors. The ORSA provides an opportunity to look at the takaful undertaking from different perspectives at any point in time to detect changes in the operational activities that may give rise to new risk. The ORSA should be continuously updated to take account of changes in the risk profile, and the performance of the ORSA may assist in identifying a new need to alter risk management policies. In performing the ORSA, the risk associated with the assets should be evaluated separately from those associated with liabilities, consistent with the evaluation method as specified in the risk management framework. The ORSA is a process that should be summarized in a report by the Board of Directors, for the Board of Directors, and local regulation may require a formal report to the supervisor. Senior management expresses their view on the appropriateness of the level of financial and other resources held, and confirms the appropriate governance and risk management mechanisms existing to monitor and report changes in the entity's capital needs. The form and content of an ORSA report should be suitable for these circumstances of the takaful undertaking. Lastly, takaful operators should disclose information to enable participants, investors, creditors, and other stakeholders to understand the risk management framework. This includes a description of risk information on the takaful undertaking's exposure to the risk and management's opinion on the effective operation of the framework. The information should be derived from systems and processes that are properly controlled and regularly assessed by the takaful operator. That's all for my part, sir. Thank you very much.
So now let's talk about the key element in supervisory review process of risk management for takaful undertaking. The supervisory authority will typically assess the risk management framework established by the takaful operator as part of its activity in overseeing a takaful undertaking. The takaful operator may be instructed by the regulatory authorities to tighten their risk management system as needed. Giving a takaful undertaking risk management framework favorable approval is typically not the supervisory authority job. The board of directors is in charge of establishing and overseeing an efficient risk management system as well as monitoring its continued effectiveness. However, the supervisor should take into account whether there is proof that this duty is not being carried out properly. The supervisor authority may pay attention to these particular matters. First, the existence and operation of a framework. Takaful operator should have a risk management framework established under the authority of the board director that provide clear communication of risk issue and policies. This framework should be documented and reflective of the process that are actually carried out in business and must be used in the day-to-day management of business. Qualitative aspect of risk governance is the second one. The supervisory authority should think about whether the risk management governance function listed at paragraph 68 of this standard are performed by individuals who have the necessary expertise, authorities, and resources to carry out their duties without interference. They should also think about whether they are sufficiently free from competing obligations to maintain objectivity in performing their duty. Number 3. Effectiveness of risk management process. The existence of a framework does not guarantee its effectiveness. The supervisory authority should assess the effectiveness of risk management framework through on-site inspection, review of supervisory reporting, and the independent report. Number 4 is fund separation issues. The supervisory authority should think about whether the PRF PIF and SHF are effectively represented in the risk management framework. When conducting its evaluation, the supervisor should take into account how the risks in each independent fund are found, evaluated and dealt with in light of the unique nature and role of each fund. Number 5 is relevant of test to the takaful operator. The supervisor should think about whether the parameter employed in the takaful operator stress tests are pertinent to the nature of the takaful operator business and whether there are pertinent stresses that have not been examined when evaluating the result. Number 6 is the clarity of Sharia compliant responsibilities. As Sharia non-compliant is a specific risk of takaful even in jurisdiction where the supervisory authority has no responsibility for Sharia supervision. The supervisor should reconsider whether the risk management framework appear to address the risk of Sharia non-compliance. A supervisor might, for example, look for evidence of involvement of Sharia board in the assessment of this risk and of a process of testing control over Sharia compliance. Number 7, issues on re-takaful. The supervisory authority should review the policy of the takaful operator to ensure that the use and treatment of re-takaful is in line with the advice of takaful understanding Sharia board. They should also consider if any risks arising from the implementation of the policy have been adequately addressed in the risk of management framework. Number 8 is, which is the last one, is supervisory reporting. Supervisory authority should reconsider from formal requirement for takaful operator to report to supervisory authority in respect of risk management, such as predict OSA, report to non-specific risk event. The frequency and scope of such report may vary depending on the nature, scale and complexity of individual undertaking business. The supervisor should consider whether report should require independent external assessment. And for summary, the supervisor authority should have the power to require takaful operator to present a remediation plan and report on its implementation leading to disciplinary action. And that's all from me. Thank you.
So first of all, systemic risk is the transmission of shocks within the takaful sector or the insurance industry in general, or at the macro level between the takaful sector and the Islamic banking or the market sector or the other financial institutions. Supervisory attention to systemic risk is not a substitute for the need for individual TOs to manage their own concentration of risk. The use of re-takaful could create a systemic risk due to the nature of this activity. Supervisor should consider whether any re-takaful operator is systemically important for the markets they supervise, such as the failure of re-takaful operator would result in instability of TUs, which see the participants' risk to the operator. The greater consideration of the re-takaful sector, the more likely it is that one operator will be systematically important. Supervisory authorities should monitor the emergence of systematically important re-takaful operators and consider the need of guidance to the market, or additionally, capital or other requirements on re-takaful operators that are identified as systematically significant. Furthermore, cooperation between mutual supervisor may be necessary. Risk characteristics of other parts or the financial sector could affect the takaful system due to concentration of investment or deposit. Other potential systematically important risk exposure include reliance of a sector on other forms of service, such as telephones or IT systems or outsourced providers. Major events such as nature or man-made catastrophes may trigger systemic failure if system risk is present. The supervisory authority may consider modeling event on an industry-wide basis to determine whether supervisory intervention is needed to address systemic risk. So that's all from me. Thank you.
In a nutshell, systematic risk in this presentation refers to the transmission of shocks within the entire takaful sector or the insurance industry in general, or at the macro level between the takaful sector and the Islamic banking or capital market sectors, or other financial institution or any other kind of circumstances whose occurrence has an impact on the entire financial system. The supervisor should be alert to the risk of concentration of exposure to an entity to a sector that is not apparent at the level of a single entity. That's all from our group. Thank you for lending your ears to our presentation, sir. Have a nice day.